Good morning, everybody, and thank you to the BFBi for allowing us to present today. We're going to start with basically a presentation on reopening.
This morning.
Yeah, feeling better.
Good.
And basically the reopening of facilities as we go forward. So I'm going to just do the introduction and hand over to Amanda, my colleague, who is the expert on this, and then Steve Moore, who will do the water treatment element of this presentation. So effectively, the idea here is to give some examples and ideas of what needs to be done to protect your facilities, legislation-wise, health and safety-wise, particularly from both the members of the public and also staff as well. So Amanda, over to you, I think.
Okay, thank you very much, Peter. Good morning, everybody. Before I do start, I just want to apologise because I've got a bit of a cold this morning. So if I start coughing and sneezing, I do apologise. So I will try and speak as clearly as possible. And like Peter said, if you've got any questions or anything you want to ask, then we do have a question and answering session towards the end. So obviously we're going to be talking about ready to reopen. Some of us have been already out there. We haven't all been closed. The majority of the food industry in particular has been working, and as for the breweries as well, some of us have been working, but perhaps not in full production. So COVID has affected us all. Now, from our point of view, where we fit in, a bit about Diversey, we supply chemicals to the food, beverage and pharmaceutical industries. So us ourselves have been behind the scenes busy making sanitizers and chemicals to ensure these businesses are kept running. So what we're going to be talking about today is a bit about what we need to do when we reopen. Perhaps those of us who have been working, it's a bit of a recap of what we can be doing, and just to think about how we can reopen safely and what we need to consider in that when we do that. So we're used to living with COVID now. We've been living with it for the last year or so, and we are adjusting our lifestyle to fit that. So for example, we've got the online, what we're doing now, which is totally different what we used to, but we adapt to that. During this presentation as well, I'll just let you know I have got a little dog that may start barking, the door may go, but we'll see how we go on. We're used to that, we make adaptations to suit. So like I said, some food and beverages have continued to operate, some of us are ready for reopening. So we have been given government guidelines for both SARS and for COVID, and they concentrate on protecting the contaminated areas. And we've got to look at ensuring that our personnel, visitors and our customers as well can safely enter a building. And they want to feel safe there while they're doing their leisure routines, while they're doing their shopping, while they're eating in restaurants, just as they did before the pandemic. We want to feel safe when we come to work. So the UK government guidelines for reopening can be found on the government website, and the focus on these is what we're looking at. It's linked to prevent the infection and also to look at making sure we clean things properly and it's hygienic. We are going to recommend the government guidelines are reviewed when you're looking at reopening, and also take into account what it's going to mean to your business. On the screen there, hopefully you can see it. There's different websites you can access. So there's the WHO, the World Health Organization, that you can go on to get guidelines. There's the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control. And there's also the UK government coronavirus guidelines as well as for you to look at. So they're quite good websites. They give information as well on the latest cases, how many deaths have occurred in each area across Europe and across the world. So for looking at distancing, screening and the flow of people, person-to-person interaction, we need to look at that because we know it's the main cause for transmission. So in production areas, think about where people are, limit the people within your facility. How do my people move that through that facility? So in and out of production, can I limit that? Have a look at where your staff are situated in your production lines, for example. Could I change the position to create better social distancing? Can I put screens up to stop people actually having to stand too close to each other by my workstations? And consider temperature monitoring. I know when I've been to a lot of customers recently, we get screened when we walk through via the infrared imaging, thermal imaging, or we quite regularly now, as I'm sure we all have, when we go out into restaurants, when we go back into the big wide world, we have to stand and have our temperature monitored. So the temperature monitoring equipment can be purchased as well to be used. So, you know, just these thoughts to consider. At the end of the day, visitors and customers want to feel safe when they're coming into the environment, and your staff want to feel safe to actually work in that environment. In hospitality, screening by server points, we're seeing that quite a lot now. Screening between seating areas, and where possible, have a one-way system to avoid unnecessary mixing of people. Thing you need to think about as well is, do you need to have any reset procedures in place? So if any of these people actually are unfortunate enough to be carrying COVID, or perhaps they've picked COVID up, what are my reset procedures if an employee tests COVID, or if a customer comes back and says I've got COVID? So obviously you're going to have to think about deep cleaning following that, and the risk. The better the screening is, the better the flow of people, the easier it will be to isolate certain areas and certain members of staff if they've come into contact with that person. So Diversey ourselves, so obviously we supply cleaning chemicals to the food and beverage industry. So this is what we're good at. So we're ideally looking at deep cleaning and disinfecting all areas following a prolonged period of closure or shutdown. So this is quite key. In your factory, maybe you've got vessels that haven't been used for quite a long time because the factory's not been running. You might have pipe work that has had water sitting in it for quite a long period of time that might need cleaning and flushing through. So all these things need to be thought about. You might have cleaning equipment that hasn't been used for a while that you suddenly start to use and it's not working. Think about the actual cleaning itself. So open plant cleaning, need to make sure that's carried out frequently. If you've got areas where you have an increased employee footfall, those areas are going to want to be cleaning more. We're going to touch on touch points later on. So amenity areas, so you've got your changing rooms, you've got your laboratories, your canteens. How often do you think these should be cleaned and disinfected? So these need to be done more frequently than perhaps pre-COVID. Because obviously they're getting touched more, the virus can spread. What's more important as well is using a registered virucidal disinfectant, so that's quite important. So when you're buying the disinfectant, ask your provider or look on the label, you're looking for the standard of EN 14476. There's a lot of sanitizers out there that don't carry this particular approval, so that is what you're looking for, because that has been proven to kill viruses, including COVID. And like I've mentioned, extra emphasis on disinfecting frequently touched surfaces. It's very same in hospitality as well. So again, deep cleaning should be completed before reopening, and cleaning and disinfection should be carried out between customers. Extra emphasis on frequently touched surfaces. In hospitality, have a seat, have a sit down, have a think about what your customers see. They're going to need to feel safe, and they want to see staff that are actively cleaning and following guidelines. So if they can see that happening, the chances are customers are going to want to come back. And also the same in the factories as well. If you're in the canteens, if staff can see areas are being cleaned down, you know, they're going to feel safe to return to work. So, like I mentioned, in the fight against infection control, we need to look outside the box. So these are the areas that we need to look at. So think about the amenity areas. So many people pass through them and they spend a lot of time in them. So they also contribute to the risk of contamination. And also this is where visitors that come into the factory as well, into the area. So these are people that are outside that come in, and these are the areas that they're going to visit as well. Think about the entrance way touch points. So door handles, door frames, swipe card access points. People go to smoke as well. So there's smoking areas need looking at. Garbage receptacles need wiping. Anything that comes into contact with people's hands. Employee welfare areas. So uniforms. How are uniforms going to be hung up and separated? Changing rooms, including lockers. Benches where my staff are going to sit and change into low care areas to high care areas. In cafeterias or lunchrooms, again, we've got the doorway frames and handles. We've got tables, chairs, refrigerator handles to think about, storage cabinets, the vending machines as well that gets used. How often are those buttons getting wiped down? They all need to be considered in a plan for cleaning. Washrooms, we've got, for example, in washrooms, we can think of our dispensers, our sinks, our taps. Have we got hand dryers in place? They also all need cleaning on a regular basis. And PPE, how are my staff going to control and manage their PPE? So also think about water fountains. We've got hallway display boards, training conference rooms, for example. So if you've got visitors coming into site, how are they going to be separated? How are we going to seat them in the training rooms and the conference rooms? And also the first aid rooms, because a lot of sites and units now are doing COVID testing on site. So how am I going to control that? Many of those touch points that I've just mentioned, yes, they're for factories, but they also for the hospitality and the pubs and the restaurant industry too. So all these areas are there. So have a sit down and think, where are people going to sit? What are they going to touch? However, with all this, the principle's the same. So you need a fast-acting virucidal disinfectant, and that should be used regularly as a precaution. So we can use sanitizer wipes, or we can use sprays that can actually stop on the surface. For all areas, obviously Diversey and your chemical provider as well will have a wide portfolio of products for each type of amenity area and application. And on the website, if anybody wants to download any of our guidebooks and hand washing instructions, all this is prepared for you, so you can have a look and see what we're recommending for you and how to help you open up. The latest cleaning and disinfection protocols for opening, like I said, some of us are already being opened. The main production area should already be included in a thorough hygiene plan, and they should have already been validated that they work and that they're good for cleaning. So these procedures will be enough. However, as an extra precaution, we would think to add an extra disinfection step with an approved product at the recommended concentration and contact time. What I will say as well, contact time there being in capital letters. In my experience, we have gone into some food factories where time is of essence, and if your chemical manufacturer is saying your sanitizer needs to be left on for a recommended 5 to 10 minutes time, it needs to be left on for that amount of time as well, because it's that actually kills off the bacteria and the viruses that are left present on the surface. So follow the operation instructions. Ensure you use the chemical as your chemical provider recommends for the correct contact time and the correct concentration as well. So first and foremost, your standard operating procedures should be followed. The other thing that's come up during COVID is the UVC. So it's ultraviolet light in the C spectrum. It enhances the effectiveness of manual disinfection. So you may have seen these in the hospital settings and healthcare that deal with infections and where it's a major concern, sorry. So these are there to control and help with the virus. It's been long proven as an effective technology to reduce contamination. and the potential for infection by using shortwave ultraviolet light to kill or inactivate a wide range of pathogenic microorganisms. And this includes bacteria, virus, and fungi. We've also seen it in perhaps in corridors. When it initially struck, people have it in meeting rooms as well. So as you're walking down the corridor, it's there to be used. It's used in the food industry in general, in chills as well, to kill off bacteria on product. And like I said, it's also been quite successfully used in hospitals. It's quite popular in that environment. There's a variety of studies that have been demonstrated to show it is effective against coronavirus and other viruses that are structurally similar. So this is something else that can be considered. As I said earlier, we've got a lot of reference guides available. These can be downloaded and printed off. We recommend deep cleaning of production areas ahead of recommissioning. So we've done these series of reference guides that can be shared. And also if you've got any specific needs or applications, we can help with that. So I've already mentioned what the common surface, what the right, coughing alert, what are the right surface cleaners and registered disinfectants. So I've mentioned about the commonly touched surfaces, and it's also important to use the correct product for its intended application. And I'm going to say that in capital letters as well. We recommend chemicals for a certain reason to do the job. I mean, when pandemic first hit, we had a lot of queries about hand sanitizers and can we use hand sanitizers to do other things. We wouldn't recommend that. So it's important that the chemical that you use is what it's used for, and we can get that from the product information sheet. I've already mentioned the approval of the EN 1476 virucidal activity. And for both hospital settings and amenity areas within production, encourage regular disinfection. So by making wipes available for anyone to use entry points and in other public areas. We've all seen as well, if we go into the supermarkets, you know, we often like to see that they're available. So when you've got entry to pub premises, catering, ensure that these are visible. So ensure if we're using wipes and sanitizers that people can walk in and staff can walk into the areas and use the sanitizer. So the intended use of the product, like I said, can be found on the safety data sheet. So using a product in a way it was not intended to be used might lead to insufficient cleaning, leaving microbes on the surface, and potentially damage the surface if it's not compatible. So questions to ask when you're looking at what disinfection I can use is, what am I cleaning? What is the debris that I'm cleaning? Certain chemicals may corrode. So we have different types of stainless steel. So what are my pipes? What are my vessels made of? What is the temperature of the water as well? Because if I'm going, some chemicals work better with hot water, some work better with cold water. How am I going to apply that chemical? What PPE do I need? So these are all questions that we need to ask when we're looking at what cleaners and disinfectants to use. So to look at that again, usage instructions and concentrations are typically provided on the product information sheet. And we need this information, obviously, when we're looking at opening up. Are we using the right chemical for the job, particularly with COVID in mind? Appropriate PPE in good condition is extremely important. So hands should be washed thoroughly with soap and water and treated with an alcohol-based hand rub before putting on PPE. Effective hand hygiene is very vital before and after using gloves. In hospital environments, workers may require one or more of the following items depending on the application. So for my staff, disposable gloves. Do they need face masks from a safety point of view? Do they need glasses? Do I need to give them an apron? So all these things are worth considering. PPE should be removed only in cleaned areas as well, and either collected to be cleaned and disinfected for use or safely discarded. So again, for hospitality, how's that going to be managed? A bit about hand washing here. We've obviously had this drilled into us from the COVID hit from the hand washing, but to be fair, in the food and beverage industry, the hand washing should always have been done. It's something we've always done. So going into a food factory, potentially washing our hands and sanitizing is already bred into us. So hand washing has been mentioned constantly during this pandemic, and we know it's, if not the main way individuals control the spread of infection together with social distancing, it does help. Also consider, I feel quite sorry for people that have to wash their hands quite frequently using soap and sanitizer. Have a think about, is there any approved hand moisturizer they need afterwards? So it's not all about washing their hands. Think about your staff as well that are constantly washing their hands. Is there something we can give them afterwards to help with that? So in production, clearly identified hand wash stations, and I think this slide speaks for itself. This is what we've been doing, and we've been doing it even more since COVID hit. Again, this is a hand wash guide, hand hygiene, so clean, disinfect and protect, showing you how to wash hands. This again can be downloaded from our website and placed on notice boards and near hand washing stations if required. It is important throughout the deep cleaning that good hand hygiene is key. So again, we can help with that, and using good soap as well can have the ability to wash the virus off your hands. We can also help with hygienic entrances. So you go into some food factories, some areas where they will not let you through the factory until you have put your hands through the sanitizer. So we can, there is the automatic dispensers as well that you can just, without having to touch them, you can put your hand under and you get the correct amount of soap or hand disinfection on your hands. Equally for hospitality facilities, we can supply hand sanitizers, so standalone automatic dispensers can be installed. We see them quite regularly now, so when they're going into the area, the hand station is there. And again, like I said, it needs to be seen so people and visitors can see that. So for your facility to be ready to reopen, it's essential that you check your equipment is in good working order. To reopen, I think a lot of areas are prioritising, tend to go on reopening, getting the product through the door, getting the material there ready for the customer. What they tend to forget about is who looks after the cleaner, basically, who looks after the cleaner. So have a think about the equipment. Does it start? Does it power up? Shall I test it with water first to make sure it draws the product up? So if I'm using dosing units, if I'm using a foamer to clean, basically, is it working? Perform titration checks to make sure the chemicals are at strength. If it's not working, ask an engineer or someone suitably qualified to have a look at for you. Your hand dispensers, check the condition of the product, because obviously if it's been stored for a while, what tends to happen, it will settle. It might evaporate, it might congeal. So check the nozzles are not blocked, and test that the dispensers are working properly. In hospitality, clean and disinfect any bottles that you're using. Clean the nozzles on your dispensers. And don't forget about the chemicals. Some chemicals, well, most chemicals will have an expiration date. They go out of date, they have a shelf life. So have a look at the labels and check they're still in date. What you also find that some chemicals may solidify. So if they're stored in a too cold environment, you may come to use them and you might find you can't use them. So that will lead us on to the water pipes as well. So, you've got water pipes in your factory or in your canteen or facility that haven't been used for a while. So have a think about the water pipes and the water flow. And that lets me go on to the next slide to hand over to Steve. Are you there, Steve?
Good morning. Yes,
Good morning.
I'm here.
Relief.
Good morning, everyone. This bit is just on Legionella and water treatment. So Legionella bacteria thrives in stagnant water, and with the buildings having little to no use over the pandemic, the risk is greatly increased. During this time, you should have carried out regular flushing of the water systems and implemented a regime to keep the water flowing, but it can commonly be overlooked. So it's important before reopening, just taking some actions to ensure the water systems are safe. This can include risk assessment updates, cleaning and disinfection of pipes, tanks, chlorifiers, and even sampling. To support our customers and the wider businesses, we have produced a basic checklist that is available to download and shown on the left of the slide. It covers such things as cooling towers, spas and pools, domestic systems such as tanks, hot water vessels, showers, pipework associated with them. As Amanda said on the last slide, any dosing equipment, pipelines and controllers should be checked before opening back up. Such things as cooling towers, they have very strict regimes and guidance in place, so they would have or should have been and will be fully cleaned and chlorinated and recommissioned before opening back up. If there are any questions, we can answer them at the end. And like I said, the checklist is available for download, and I think it will be sent out with this presentation, or there will be a link in the presentation. Now I'll hand over back to Amanda, if you're there.
I should go really quiet and pretend I'm not here.
That's what I tried to do, but I felt really bad, so I thought I better say something.
Okay, thanks very much, Steve. So just to finish off briefly, we're going to look at the training and look at the actual auditing as well. So when we're actually opening up. Now, I think really training and how we can train has certainly changed, and this does show the fact that we're doing this online now. This is how we're doing things moving forward. Online has its plus points, it also has its disadvantages, but I think reopening gives us the chance to revisit our employees' training records. So before we reopen, we've got chance to basically start again and do a review. Now, I do know training is very important to keeping your staff up to date, and sometimes that can be a bit of a hard work keeping those records up to date. So reopening is a good excuse, good reason. Let's have a look at the training. So it's an ideal opportunity to retrain. It's a good opportunity to refresh staff's knowledge, and also we need to retrain them on what to do with COVID. Again, you know, we are going to have COVID procedures in place, so it's a good excuse to get them back to work and retrain them on what to do. So like I said, to minimise training for your staff, you know, think about using pre-wet cleaning, disinfection wipes, help them to understand which frequent touch points to clean and disinfect. So mentioned about the COVID and what they need to concentrate on, often cleaning during the day, where to provide hand hygiene solutions and which products to use against viruses. Again, these free training guides are available from diversey.com. So yeah, we've also take advantage of the e-learning solutions as well to refresh their knowledge, because obviously classroom training now can be difficult to manage. And I think moving forward, there's going to be a mixture of training in the classroom and training online. I know in our organisation and in other organisations that I've quite a bit to do with, the online training has been quite good, because you haven't got the expense of travel, overnight stays, etc. People can log on in their own environment. So yeah, take advantage of the e-learning solutions as well to refresh people's knowledge. Again, with audits, how your factory, how your sites get audited is going to change as well moving forward. So audits are a tool, they're a good tool to check if cleaning and disinfection are done in the right way and with the right frequency. And audits should be seen as a positive thing. So, you know, have a think, can you answer the following questions? Are we practicing enhanced cleaning and disinfection procedures? Do we use effective products for each cleaning and disinfection task? Do we have the right amount of product and PPE on stock? And again, mentioned about the training. Are our employees sufficiently trained and regularly reminded about what to do? And when we get audited, this helps us ask these questions. External audits as well help to reassure you that you and your staff are doing the right thing. And it's good for customer relations as well, the fact that you are getting audited and you adhere to all the standards that they require. So hospitality facilities should consider putting into place a checklist to be completed by each shift to reinforce the hygiene measures in these times. Now, online auditing, as well, is a thing that people are doing as well. So you might find moving forward that you have virtual audits where you have the auditor doing the laptop and walking around the factory, or you might also have the auditor come on site for a day rather than the full 2-3 days, however long the audit may be. So try and think of audits as a positive thing, and these are the questions that you need to ask. So we approach the end of this now, but I am going to pass you on to Peter just to summarise, because I'm conscious I've been given all these slides to read and my voice is maybe a bit monotone towards the end. So a bit of refresher. So Peter's just going to go through what we've talked about as a summary. If that's okay, Peter, over to you.
Yeah, firstly, can you hear me, guys?
We can hear you,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, firstly, I'd really like to thank you, Amanda, having the lurgy and doing such an amazing job of presenting that. And Steve sat on a site in the car park about to go and do some essential water treatment work. Guys, it was a really good presentation. Thank you. But again, just as an overview, obviously we're looking at risk minimization here. Like all things in life, we can't eliminate risk. We've got to minimize it as best we can. We have to follow things like government guidelines, which includes the distancing, the cleaning, making sure that disinfectants work properly, which is critical, and the right PPE. At the end of the day, we all have a responsibility to ensure that we are doing the right thing for our businesses and the people that are going to walk in and out of them, and that is critical. But it is just looking at risk minimization. Having spent since 1987 involved with Legionella and Legionnaire's disease, it's an invisible issue that we have to deal with and deal with as best we can. COVID is just another one of those that if we do the right things, importantly, we will protect as many people as we can. And I think that is the key to all of this in a nutshell. So everything from training to auditing to following up to looking after our staff as well. All of these things are critically important to make sure that we do everything we can to protect people and also ensure that we don't get locked down again, because I don't know about you, I'm fed up of it. So going back to the pub is a lovely thing, even sat outside. So in a nutshell, I'd say thank you all, and thank you, Ruth, and thank you, BFBi, for allowing us to present.
Great, thank you. I've got a couple of questions. So when you say that the factory, the site should clean more frequently, is there a template that indicates how frequent certain areas should be cleaned? And also, when you say deep cleaning, does that need to be done by a professional company, or can you do it yourself? And if you do it yourself, how do you know that the deep clean is deep enough?
For the deep cleaning frequency, this is based on the factory. It depends what kind of factory we're talking about. Obviously, if we're looking at a brewery, things do need cleaning on a regular basis. So you have your standard clean, which we do. Deep cleaning needs to be done, I guess, depends on what product you're dealing with. I classify deep cleaning as everything gets stripped down, and I have a theory of if it's put together and it can come apart, it needs to come apart. So things like seals get removed, things if it's a mixer, blades get stripped down. So that all depends on the product that you're dealing with to how you deep clean. So without knowing the factory, it's quite a difficult question to answer. The first part of the question, can you just remind me of that, what that was?
Yeah, is there a template that you can go to that sort of indicates how frequently certain areas should be cleaned? Because I'm assuming that not all areas need to be cleaned as frequently as each other.
Yes, that's correct. So again, it depends on how many, if we're talking about touch points and canteen areas, then obviously that needs cleaning quite frequently because they're getting handled. But if you've got something that isn't, again, without knowing what you're working with, it's difficult to say about a template because there's no set template to when you deep clean. It all depends on the product and what you're making. So that would have to go on industry, that have to go on experience. The thing is, I think, to take from this question is if you can ask your chemical provider or who you're buying the chemicals from, they can actually assist you with that. So what needs deep cleaning and how often?
Great, thank you. I've got a couple of questions here that came in. Again, have you come across Legionella issues on reopening the site? And then how long does that take to rectify if a site has Legionella?
I think this one's for me. I've come across Legionella bacteria. It's quite common in water systems, in buildings, factories, processing. It comes as for reopening. I've come across it in factories where they've been shut for a period of time before COVID. I've not come across it yet during the reopening of some factories, but we have many more factories to reopen. To rectify it, it'll depend on the approach that the customer or business has. If they sample to start with, samples can take up to 10 days to come back with results for Legionella bacteria. You'll normally get a presumptive, which is just it's there, but we don't know how much within the first 5 days. Then you'll need to clean and disinfect the system, which can take anywhere up to 48 hours, depending on teams and availability. And then you might have to wait another 5 to 10 days to get it all clear from samples. Most places, factories, businesses, office blocks will normally, if they've been shut for a period of time, just disinfect the system anyway. With cooling towers, you've got to disinfect them and fully recommission them if you don't use them for 14 days, 7 to 14 days anyway. So that wouldn't be so much of an issue. But yeah, it is common, and not just when reopening. It's just a common bacteria in general, and we combat that with mostly cleaning and disinfection. I hope that answers the question.
No, that's great. Thank you, Diversey.